Chantal and I found one totally new one that hasn't, well, it was only very recently posted. But we're going to do two, that's numbers 5 and 6, if you're keeping track of that. But right after that, while those evaluations are like fresh in our minds and we are still able to take a look at things in the portfolio, what Chantal's going to be doing is taking careful notes as we discuss issues that we're confronting, not so much in looking at the e-portfolios per se, but in the evaluation rubric. Because as Chantal and I were discussing on the way over here, one thing that's not addressed in the literature, and something very important that the general administration wants to find out, is how useful are these value rubrics, specifically when they're applied to e-portfolios. These things were never designed with the thought of being used for e-portfolios. It's primarily for looking, well, quite frankly, it's sort of a conventional way of looking at papers, you know, because that's kind of our grading model for things. So the issue here is, you know, what kinds of things are challenging, missing, or that we might recommend need to be added or revised to these kinds of rubrics. So that gets to be a somewhat, hopefully somewhat more vibrant discussion, you know, than just reliability figures. Looking ahead also, speaking of reliability figures, to the end point of things, which isn't that far off, but right at the end of the semester, I'm going to be pushing surveys to you to administer to students. In addition, you know, the standard online surveys for all of the instructor participants. And as well for you, Chantel's going to be doing more in-depth individual interviews depending on how you prefer it done, either face-to-face or via phone. And the reason we're doing it that way is we really want you to just, you know, expand and explain as much as you feel comfortable with. It's a lot easier to do that than to, you know, decide to type a you know, a long essay on a survey form, you know, and plus it can be a little richer because it's more of a conversation than just, you know, answering a question that might not really get at what you want to say. The evaluative task we face at the very end of the project, what I'm also going to push to you is a very brief consent form for your students that says that they give us permission to take a look at their e-portfolio solely for the purpose of, you know, understanding e-portfolios better, and that we're going to be doing this after their work has been graded. I think it's very important that we don't do any of that in any way that will even give them the impression that it coincides with their work being evaluated. So, and the other thing is we can't do any of that until they've turned in their completed e-portfolios anyway. So what we'll be doing is, from the students who have signed that consent form, you randomly pick 2 or 3, and those kind of go into our pool of links to student e-portfolios. And what we'll be doing is almost exclusively, we may need to get together a couple of times early in the spring, but what we're going to be doing is doing exactly what we're doing with these e-portfolio evaluations to the actual student e-portfolios. Because one of the questions that will be very interesting is, since we've all designed the e-portfolio, you know, assignments and orientation, all that, with this kind of thing in mind, do we have an easier time evaluating each other's students' e-portfolios than the challenges we sometimes confront with doing these? So that's basically how things look, and of course, as I you know, draft and prepare reports for the general administration, a very important part of that process is having those available for you to contribute to however you see fit. So you may have either editorial comments or say, gosh, I'd really like to see a section on such and such, or, you know, could you change this? Because we're all doing this project together, and even though I'm ultimately responsible for delivering the report, it is a discussion of our collective experiences of learning about this stuff. So that's how things look. And D-Day, or should I say E-Day in this case, right? The end of the the formal end of the project is scheduled for February 15th when the final report is due. Okay? Which means, of course, that I'll be working hard on this on Valentine's Day. But the other thing is just a logistical sort of thing. No sooner do I get back from LA than I have been summoned again to Chapel Hill by the General Administration, by actually the group that includes our project, the General Education Council. They're the point of formulating some policy statements about Gen Ed and all of this. So next Friday, we will have a preset agenda that Chantel will be carrying out,
I will be in Chicago.
that Chantel will not be carrying out. Yeah, what we'll do, by that time, you know what we can easily take care of though, because our goal,
Evaluations.
exactly, our goal was,
Put the last two up and maybe have them done.
There you
by
go.
this Friday.
yeah. Our goal is about 8 sample e-portfolios because we can talk about, that's a thorough amount of, practice passes. And what we'll do is we'll just say, if we can get everybody to take care of those, have those in play, sent to us, by next Friday, we'll be able to process those, come back with some hard results, and then, kind of move toward the, where the rubber meets the road about getting student feedback and your feedback. Just in case you have the chance to pass the word along, Chantel will be going out and doing interviews, not just with the individuals in the project, but also with the people who could not continue with the project. One of the more important things that often is overlooked is, why more people don't do portfolios. And we really would like for the individuals who could not continue to share their thoughts on, what kind of challenges it poses to do e-portfolios and how, they found that to be particularly difficult and what might be done to address those issues. That's something nobody talks about in e-portfolios. And I don't know if any research has been done that does that. The research in e-portfolios, I don't know if you poked around in the research library that we have on Blackboard at all, but almost all the research is that sort of e-portfolios, it's a panacea for everything in higher education, greatest thing since sliced bread. You can magically gauge student performance. It's a life-changing experience for students. And particularly, because Ziggy, you have some background in the portfolio world, as well. It's like, okay, it can be very useful and helpful, but let's not, kind of overstate what it can do. It is a useful educational tool. So what we're going to do is get some of that feedback from our colleagues. And with that, let us go to the evaluation of the sample e-portfolios. And David, I'm just pulling this up so that you don't have to go digging for it here. And we can get those taken care of. Does everybody have the two evaluation forms?
There should be, I'll put two, I'll put two back there.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All right.
So, I did have one question.
Sure.
You were saying that you want us looking at these rubrics in terms of how they might be changed, how they can be different.
Mhm.
Or, do you mean just in like this sort of relatively familiar rubric framework, or were you looking for more outside the box type thoughts as well?
Really, both of those could be good. We're really doing very much a pilot test of the linkage between these rubrics and e-portfolios. These have been used, as far as I can tell, pretty much exclusively for just looking at either maybe traditional portfolios or individual student work products. But part of it's like for example, what does this not capture about e-portfolios that we need to know? That was a big topic that emerged this morning. What might make these easier to use in practice? Anything like that. All right, sir, I have got your thing here. What we can do is we can both be looking at this at the same time, Daniel, but no copy of the cover sheet. Let's see. Good choice, you know, on the coldest day of the season so far, we're looking at 2 Florida e-portfolios, in South Florida at that.
This is number 5.
You know, something about positioning. It's like you want to be photographed in front of a pool spot. You want, it's like, do they not look at these pictures once they're posted?
Did you see the Kim Kardashian
Oh,
centaur
Yes,
photo?
yes.
I thought that was the most creative spoof
everywhere.
of a picture I've seen so
So take her
far.
off the news feed.
This is Michael, is that how you pronounce her name?
Michaela. I actually have Michaela in my class, but she has only one. Oh, and just to put things in context, from looking at this and the other e-portfolio from South Florida, it appears that South Florida requires this template for the e-portfolio. So, yeah, feel free to mark it as you see fit.
Oh my God, you have the same birthday. I already love her. I'm biased. I'm biased. Ha ha ha. Biased.
This is a classic. Okay, 1 year's worth of classics.
To be fair, it is a freshman, so.
So it'd be interesting to know why, if there's any particular reason she's going to Argentina as opposed to someplace else.
Didn't you say that she's doing her career? Where is this pre-based? Oh, here we go. I was starting to get worried about communication. Oh, by the way, this is also a touch screen.
Well, that's
Well,
quite on the topic there.
it's like,
Are you supposed to spend that on those kind of charts?
oh yeah.
Oh, there you go. Check.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
What? Have you ever put a boat in the line? What's the world?
So do we get the preface to not cross the Jordan? What? So this is like a critical analysis here, but did I miss something? I thought she wanted to examine this from a scientific standpoint. Chemicals from non-available possessed. Okay.
Well, again, in a way, that's, oddly,
The foundation for every religion based on.
yeah, both of them.
Yeah, okay. Is that different? Not believable. What is this evidence suggesting that some of the information in the Bible is pretty spot on?
Well, it could be that the sort of promises are different from scriptures in the same. That's what I'm wondering. If he's saying that he's very or if she's being too specific. And of course, there's no way of that. It's a huge peak. And don't forget on these evaluations, the first page is front and back. And if you do want to write some marginalia here, any sort of comments, sometimes what we do is we take notes of that, and those may appear in some of our reporting.
Owls with prophets. Hey, that's great. Okay, here we go. Science.
Remember, our goal is to get hopefully both of these evaluated and have discussion by the time we get there.
Yeah, this is a fairly lengthy paper.
Pretty ambitious for it.
Writing, I mean, the actual writing stuff was, pretty good, especially given her age.
Yeah.
It's a certain level of sophistication that I don't always see with freshmen. So we do something else?
Yeah. Appreciate it. It's kind of different. Okay.
Gladys project. So she's just doing an analysis of this website.
Very. I'm still a little lost for confused with everything.
Okay. Yes, that's her on the lap, I guess. It's somebody who's 16, presumably not her. And she's, is that her dancing? Some sort of, is that a soccer game? Okay, well, that's not her. Yeah, we need a new one. Need a new category here, incomplete.
Remember, our unit analysis is the portfolio as a whole, so.
So we just have this and the back, this is.
Oh, it is, okay.
Here's
I didn't like that.
almost getting just a dichotomy, just a split. I'm trying to do hers from, the papers that she has on there versus the rest of
Okay.
it.
Actually, as you're finishing that last number or two, how you doing over there, Zeta?
I'm down.
You're always like a model of efficiency for these things. Actually, I think what you were mentioning is a great starting point for examining the connection between rubric and portfolio. If you could kind of mention what you were using about semantics, I think it's real important about, this dichotomy between what we're seeing in one piece of the portfolio versus another.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing that stood out for me the most were the two papers that she had included.
Which one is it? Okay.
Michaela.
Yeah. They seem to be, especially, considering that she's a first-year student, I thought the writing was pretty good. She was taking on some big stuff. The papers were, while they had some, mistakes in them, they were kind of interesting to read, and I was really kind of drawn to that. But then I'm looking at the rest of the portfolio, and it's just, this doesn't really seem to be very much there. It's like, well, I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to go to Buenos Aires. Well, why Buenos Aires? What draws you to that particular location versus, somewhere else?
The thinness of the portfolio itself obviously is easily explained by the fact that, it's an 18-year-old freshman. But, these things that you're talking about, Daniel, it is more like the critical thinking about the presentation of the portfolio, right? If you want to go somewhere, justify that objective. Right. So maybe actually, Chantel, for this, see if I'm representing this properly, Daniel, that one of the concerns is how to weight the contents within the e-portfolio versus the construction of the e-portfolio itself. Because I kept on thinking back and forth, it's like, oh, well, the paper does this, well, but this other part doesn't do this, and so, wound up assigning numbers that are kind of midway in between, I guess.
And then there's the whole photo section. That's just basically her scrapbook. I know, I'm assuming that all those pictures are meaningful to her, for one reason or another, but it's totally lost, on the audience because she doesn't organize them in any, comprehensible way. There are no captions. To us, it just seems like a random series of photos.
What are the, not necessarily focusing on contents of her specific e-portfolio, what things are we encountering with the deployment of the rubric itself? I think that's a very important question about, how do you balance the different qualities of content when you're using the rubric, right? If you have, some pieces that are terrific and other pieces that are really questionable, do you split the difference? Do you go with the better things? Do you say the bad things, weigh the whole thing down?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to probably find ways to implement is how these things are set up to feature the information that we're assessing, because it's not just about the actual content. We're actually looking at the way that it's presented, and also, I guess if someone labels this as research, we're looking for a research component. So the labeling or subcategory that fall into, I guess, the assignment criteria, that would have to be maybe two separate categories. So the assignment criteria, and whether it's something that would require a PowerPoint or an actual document or video. And then the other component would probably be like, whether the student labeled it appropriately, so like labels, subcategories that fit within the genre of their major or the course. That would be my thing, because if I say, well, upload your research and argumentative essays, well, obviously they could label each individually under essays, or they could, just do two separate ones. I mean, however they want to do it, but it still should be represented as those kinds of works that would feature research of some sort, or some kind of supporting evidence. So that was the issue I had with Amanda, was that she was pretty affluent in her subject matter. I think she's like communications, or, she has like a lot of communications-based things and public relations, but she had no research whatsoever in her academic works. So if your essays that you're featuring, at least she had a narrative, which was appealing to me for, a writing course, but the other assignments, one was a PowerPoint, the other was like, another kind of abstract response where she could use first person, but I didn't see that critical component. I didn't see her differentiating, these kind of writing genres. And so that falls into our writing category, but still, if you're gonna create a, portfolio, we need to see like how you're setting up the platform to represent the work. That's kind of one of the things that we need to do. So it really falls back on the instruction as well, like the actual instructor's ability to get the students to, execute in a way that would just be contingent upon the students' work quality versus their digital literacy. You know what I mean?
Oh, sure. And actually, that topic area was explored a bit this morning at the UNCG cohort, because, one of the issues that emerged was, okay, what are we really evaluating here? Are we simply evaluating the student's work, or are we, through the student's work, really primarily evaluating the clarity of the assignment instructions and how well matched they are to the e-portfolio environment? I mean, as we well know, particularly with e-portfolios, you will get exactly what you do or don't ask for.
Right.
So, I mean, I find, when I say your reflection needs to consider the following questions, and I have a list of questions. There are 4 of those questions. By golly, the students answer those questions, and they do not answer or raise any other questions.
Right.
Which is okay, if that's all you're looking for. You mentioned something too, that Chantal, this is something that's, I think, new to consider in itself, and that is, how do you adapt these evaluative criteria to different media of presentation? Because, I mean, and this is of course a big issue in the whole field of English and literary studies. Written communication no longer means what it meant in the 1960s.
Right.
And so, can these sub-competencies apply equally well to for example, like written communication, to a conventional paper, and to a PowerPoint, which in many cases is primarily verbal? And one of the things that's left out here in terms of the whole written communication thing, on some of my reflection components, I give students the option of being a video. Now that is verbal, of course, this is your whole world, right? I mean, this is verbalized communication. It's oral communication, but there may well be a written component that accompanies that. So how well do these transfer from medium to medium? That could, I mean, if Marshall McLuhan is right, the medium is the message, it may well be that we need some specificity out here about what we're looking for depending on what medium we're operating in. If it's a PowerPoint, or if it's a video, or if it's even just audio, then are we saying, well, grammar and syntax appropriate to an oral style or a written style?
Yeah, that's a big difference.
What other sorts of things with the rubric kind of reading the object of analysis. And this is really neat because honestly, this is totally new ground. Nobody's really looked at this. Is anybody else freaked out when you see birth dates in the 1990s?
Oh, yeah.
I see it all the time.
And the student's a junior.
Yeah, I think if we just created like a visual category, like perhaps maybe just a visual category with maybe two subcategory components that dealt with the way that the students execute their portfolios based on, I think, the majors and courses that they are reflecting. I think that would really impact, you know, kind of what we assess as being their understanding of what they should put on the platform.
I'm not looking at you, I just ran across something as I was thinking about how to apply this. Yeah, you know, and in fact, there is some literature on this. In a subcategory of the digital literacy research is dedicated exclusively to visual literacy.
Right.
And that would seem to be very relevant to e-portfolios. And it also covers some of the things we're seeing that we look at, well, like you're pointing out the little photo collage, right, the scrapbook that Michaela had. It's not that the photos were bad, and quite frankly, even the analysis of them doesn't seem to fit anywhere on here, maybe indirectly through critical thinking, but what does framing of an issue mean, right, in a visual context? But it was this whole idea of the student, partly it's an awareness of audience, but partly it may just be this whole idea of, well, you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words, and the picture is its own impact, and I don't really need to, you know, explain it. If it shows me dancing, then obviously this shows that, you know, that's important to me. And also, you know, strategic selection of information. And I'm thinking about that with poor Amanda here. Here's some of her organizations and her leadership. The Facial Hair Appreciation Club. I kid you not. And direct quote, oh dear. Secretary for, and it has an acronym, FHAC, a club that my friend started for fun on campus. We meeting, yes, every other Wednesday. How about the grammar appreciation? Other activities. And again, this is the whole idea about, is this critical thinking? Is it something about, like, this being online, the student feels they don't need to elaborate enough? Other activities, I don't even understand them. Beef studs. I have painted up with the beef studs, which is not defined, for football games to demonstrate positive school spirit. With a name like that, I'm not sure I wanted it. But,
It's part of yes. Well, you're right, we don't know.
I mean, no, not even good. Although, is this the student that, yeah, I think, no, this isn't the student that had her picture in front of the bowl.
No.
That would have explained something about beef maybe, but, no.
But is it at the same university, is she at the same school?
It's at the same university, yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is part of what we may be seeing here is, I think these rubrics also assume that the expectations for an e-portfolio are transparent to the evaluators. Because at universities, in fact, when we interviewed Gail Ring at Clemson University, where they, up until recently, required e-portfolios as a condition for graduation. You had to have it pass muster. They stopped requiring e-portfolios. And part of it was they said, well, we committed to evaluate every item in every e-portfolio, and it just became unworkable. I mean, how are you gonna do this? I mean, look at what it takes for us, you know, to go through something with just a handful of categories. But, when you're doing that on a university-wide level, you know, the university has collectively decided, here's what the e-portfolios have to demonstrate, right? Here's what has to be included, here's what they have to show. And a lot of these things then become much more transparent. I mean, we're kind of guessing, you know, there's a lot that remains in the dark here about, well, you know, in the context of the courses the student was taking, you know, we might not classify something as a research paper, but, you know, maybe according to the university it is. Okay. Other things in this area. Continues to be maybe it's, yeah, it's Amanda. It's strange stuff.
You know, one thing that I would kind of like to know more about is, you know, other than fulfilling a requirement, you know, what does a student really want to do with this? I mean, is it intended to be more of an informative, you know, compilation? Is it intended to be persuasive? Is Drew, does he want to use his e-portfolio to help him, you know, get a job once he graduates? You know, I mean, you know, what do they want to do with it other than, you know, just checking, you know, something off on the graduation list?
You know, and that's a point that, quite frankly, when this whole project, and remember, you know, there are 5 campuses doing these kinds of investigations right now. When this is set up, there didn't seem to be an awareness of the fact that there isn't just one thing called an e-portfolio. That if you're talking about e-portfolios helping students make the transition from college to career, what a university is looking for in an e-portfolio is quite different than what an employer might be looking for in an e-portfolio. So, you know, how does that influence the context of this rubric? Are we talking about, for example, framing the issue, right, the explanation of issues, how it's framed and all that? Are we talking about that in a professional context or an academic context? I mean, yeah, I looked, for example, at particularly Amanda's, and I kind of get the feeling that it's almost like a university-sanctioned Facebook page. Gee, you know, I enjoy this, that, and the other, and I'm just, you know, having a great time. Did you
Picture of a tree.
Zibby, did you also find anything a little bit odd? And again, this is one of these things where does this fit on the rubric? Notice that Amanda sort of changes her perspective in different parts of the e-portfolio, where parts are written first person and parts are third person.
Yeah, that's what I was saying about her assignments that she had. It's, you know, it's really not a real grasp or reflection of her research or objective writing ability, and you don't get really an academic sense from the way that, I mean, obviously you have your classes and projects, and so we kind of want to see them reflected, and I don't think she has a good variety of those assignments reflected, so.
I think we just sent on one of the beef stems or whatever. Because she also has these beer, you see where my mind is, these bull sculptures are on there.
Yeah, she's a photographer, so she must like bulls. Oh, she must be a Taurus. Her birthday is in May, so that's her zodiac.
Yes.
Oh, she started her own business.
Well, again, I'm not sure what that means, because
Right.
the word company is in scare quotes. So,
I mean, does that mean she's just a freelance photographer, or does it mean something else?
I don't know. I guess her middle name must be Ray because the company's name is Ray of Sunshine.
Yeah.
But it's interesting she doesn't make that connection.
Middle name's right.
Tutor a bull.
Okay.
I sure hope that's like their mascot.
No, she's, her birthday's in May, so she's probably a Taurus, which their, symbol for their, yeah, their emblem.
Yeah, but it work with College of Education, tutor a bull program. Okay, so, other things, fascinating,
I'm sure
bizarre,
that's- I'm sure
nature
that's
per
stuff.
e-portfolio. So, what other things about the rubric, because one of the things that we're kind of doing is, first, I mean, we're kind of acting as consultants for the general administration on the use of rubrics with this stuff. And the other thing possibly is also, by proxy, kind of giving feedback to AAC and you. Because it's quite possible that some of these results could be presented in the context of an AAC-U conference or something like that. You know, one of the things I'm wondering too, and we haven't really gotten into this explicitly, but it sure has played a role with these two portfolios. There seems to be a presumption here that the e-portfolio you're looking at is a completed product. And Daniel, that might explain part of our struggle with that, with Michaela's, right? Because clearly she's in progress here, but for formative feedback, wouldn't you want to be applying these rubrics earlier to a student's work, you know, than just the finished e-portfolio? You know, to say, okay, right now, for instance, you're at a 2 on, you know, context and assumptions. And here's what you need to do to move up to a 3 or 4. That's an interesting question. How, an open question, how useful are these rubrics for formative feedback as well as summative feedback? So,
That would be interesting to look at the progress, like if they were evaluated early enough in the semester, to have like a mid-semester evaluation and then compare that to the end of the semester.
yeah,
For like, if it were implemented like in the spring, let's say for an example, full semester, like and compare the two evaluations to see you can really measure the progress that way. If you had like a, right before fall break, maybe, if you.
Yeah,
like-
midterms.
Mhm.
Midterms.
hope you either got that on camera or wrote that down, because that's a good, yeah, that's a good observation to make there, because one of the things is not just how well we're using these, but how well these could be used. And quite frankly, if you would suggest, maybe the same here, I don't know if either of you are involved directly in this kind of evaluative work here, but UNCG uses these, like when it's time for gen ed assessment of a particular category of gen ed competencies. All of a sudden, you know, nobody ever talks about the value rubrics, right? All of a sudden, here they come, right? And you're addressing, you know, you're evaluating complete student work, and, you know, it's sort of like, oh, look, you know, this course is doing a pretty good job at gen ed because the students are mostly getting 3s. And that's it. But it makes you wonder, well, maybe the students, maybe the students get 4s if this were used incrementally, you know, as a developmental tool. Again, more labor, but still.
I mean, you know, we want to go, you know, we want to go to the point of considering things like how individual pages are formatted, organized, you know, how, you know, just how engaging is the overall product, you know, how does it maintain our interest and level of attention, or is that sort of really outside what you're looking at here?
Well, yeah, you know, that's an interesting thing. Are these sub-competencies relative to particular audiences?
Mhm.
Because, you know, as a professor, I look at this and I give it a certain level of ratings and everything. But if I were advising the student from the standpoint of, okay, I'm evaluating this as a prospective employer, right? That's gonna change things a bit, particularly with the setting up of the issues and conclusions and, I mean, the conclusions and outcomes are gonna be totally different. So a student might get, you know, 4 on a more social type of orientation like Amanda has. Not it's constructed, I mean, theoretically, please. And, but for employment purposes, I mean, if this is supposed to be something you can, with minor alterations, present to an employer, I mean, Amanda needs some help.
Yeah. I mean, is there, you know, I mean, is there any value in having, and thinking about this in terms of a wider audience? I mean, as a professor, I mean, you've got to spend time with her if she's your student, but is there any value to thinking about it in terms of, well, how could we make this better so that more people want to spend time with it?
Right, and in fact, the payoff that's envisioned by working in that direction, I think the Board of Governors is thinking in terms of, all right, if students are creating these e-portfolios, proof of e-portfolios being a good idea for them would be, does it enable more students to land jobs? I mean, this is really what they're thinking of. From the instructional standpoint, obviously part of it's pedagogical, the bigger picture there from an institutional standpoint. And the literature alludes to this, it doesn't push it very hard. I think work being published now and in the near future will. The hope is that e-portfolios help students give a rationale to their education. And the payoff for that would be if they understand why they're taking these courses and why they're doing these assignments, it will improve retention. Well, because if they understand their education, they're more likely to stick with it. I haven't seen any hard data on retention or anything like that with e-portfolios, but that certainly is one of the hopes. Okay, other stuff.
So that's like out, you know, above and beyond declaring a major? I mean, you know, I mean, don't you kind of make some of those decisions, or don't you gain some of that understanding? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, and that's a good point, and that's why, if you take a look at dropout figures nationally, overwhelmingly, the key period of students dropping out of college is after the first year and before the second year. Transition of freshman to sophomore. And a big part of that is exactly what you said. They don't have that goal yet of that major. And they don't have that focus yet. And a lot of them, particularly they're just going through gen ed classes, they feel like, I'm just jumping through hoops, what's the point? This isn't relevant to my career. If they have one in mind, maybe they haven't declared a major, maybe they haven't decided, they have no idea what they're doing. And
Well, they may not have a good idea of who they are at that point in their life.
well, yeah, yeah.
I mean, those things go hand in hand.
Yeah, and of course, one of the better ways of addressing that, and, you know, A&T does this, UMCG does it, is not so much push students to declare the major earlier, but help students have meaningful personal development experiences, you know, as soon as they get on campus. So, you know, they're developing cohorts, you know, that maybe share their interests, or that they get involved in, you know, organizations that, again, even if it's something as simple as something that just keeps them on campus a
So,
little bit
so
more.
those are internal support systems.
Yeah. That's why if you wanna look in an area that's a high priority funding area at the university, it's not gonna be any of our individual departments as much as it is things like various types of student support services. Because otherwise you start getting that drop off of enrollment.
Especially important for students who don't have the external systems in place, you know, family, or not a connection.
And, you know, we're, not that we ever really have been, but particularly these days, you know, AT, UCG, you know, are not these kind of universities where it's like, well, you know, I'm an eighth generation, you know, legacy from a wealthy family that's coming here, and, you know, it's just, it's not kind of an automatic thing, you know, students have real life demands, and my God, this week, I've had 2 students who are coping with, shooting incidents, one of which occurred in a student's apartment, and left her homeless. And, you know, you go, well, you know, so I mean, there's real stuff going on, you know, beyond just, oh, they lose interest. And honestly, I'm not too sure how we deal with that. I mean, this is just sort of like, well, you know, students using emergency food services, the university offers. So, let me see what education is always able here. Yeah, I actually had to call support for the exact same thing with task string. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so, feeling okay going into a week of the
Work.
Tell me about it. Half of what I'm packing to take to LA, if not more, is, you know, task-related stuff. All right. Well, once again, thank you. And the homework assignment for everybody is hopefully we have Symphony portfolios 1 through 6 evaluated. And I'll be able to do some pattern analysis to have for you in lieu of our meeting next week. All right, thanks.
When's gonna be our last physical meeting this semester?
Actually, that's a good question. I wanted to check with you guys about your academic calendar and everything. Your last day of classes is
Fourth.
December 4th. Okay, that's just a couple of days after ours. Let me check on coordinating that with UNCG, because what I'm thinking is that, actually, we could do that last physical meeting on the 5th possibly. And then, just wrap up the face-to-face component for a while. Go ahead and do our analyses of each other students' completed portfolios over break. And then it's report time. We'll also have our survey results that are automatically being fed into Qualtrics anyway from the students, and those should be coming out, you know, in time for the end of classes, or at latest, you know, the first part of exams, and hopefully by the end of classes. Okay, definitely by the end of classes.
At least my kids are gonna tap out.
Yeah, and technically, even though I'm still submitting it, you know, anyway, technically, because this is institutional research, this isn't even subject to IRB approval, but, why not, you know? And actually, with the IRB thing, it is, I mean, it is kind of pro forma, because I already know it's exempt from, you know, any sort of IRB research